could cover a bit on investigating truth. So normally we call this as a self-inquiry, the Sanskrit word being Atma vicAra. This word vicAra is translated generally as inquiry, but the more appropriate translation would be, I think, meditation. Inquiry is usually linear, a question and answer, whereas the vicAra has the implication, the investigative approach recommended in the Upanishads and so on, is more a 360 degrees inquiry, or even I should say it's a spherical inquiry in all the three dimensions, and even the time dimension too. So the investigation we conduct is not merely a question-answer linear way of gaining information, but it is more a complete investigation from all nuances and angles possible. So we can call it as meditation, because meditation is nothing but looking at all the possible facets of the given moment now. So in fact, we can even treat this as meditation. So if some of you would like to relax, close your eyes, and just listen to the sounds, even that is quite welcome. The first thing perhaps that's most striking to all of us is we are always experiencing something. There is not a moment that goes without detecting something in the environment or within us. Whether it is the ugliest of the squalor that you see, or you may be in the most enchanting concert hall, the best theater in your city, you experience them. It could be heart-wrenching sounds of gunfire, or there could be pious speeches or some sacred mantras, whatever you may hear. That hearing is an experience. Similarly, it could be foulest of the stenches or the sweetest of the fragrances. You smell, and smelling is an experience. So it doesn't matter, really speaking, what sense is involved, or whatever the content of that experience is, we experience it. And another surprising thing is this experiencing does not demand any effort on our part. It doesn't require any training, any learning. You just do it automatically. And there is no energy expended in this effort, which is not really an effort, in this experiencing. So it is totally freely available, and it is just there as your own quality. It's your own attribute. Hildenos, an example I often give, is a thermometer. So the thermometer, you just hold it there in the room, in the space, it senses the temperature. There is no big effort involved on its part. Whereas a thermometer may sense only the heat of the space or the room, we have that capacity to sense multiple things all at once in the moment. So this experiencing goes on unstoppably. You cannot stop it at any moment. And it is always in the now, in the present moment, like a thermometer which cannot tell you the temperature of yesterday or the temperature that is going to be tomorrow. It just tells you that whatever the temperature is at the moment. So what we know and what we experience is also right at this moment. And experiencing is actually knowing things, whether we sense through our eyes or sense through the ears, sense through the nose, tongue, touch, skin, and so on. They're all basically, we know the things. Whatever we know, we classify into these 5 sensory qualities or attributes and give them names of smelling, hearing, touching, seeing, and so on. But basically, we know the thing. So experiencing, we can say, is only knowing. In effect, then, knowing is our basic tenet. It is just naturally there. It has not obtained through any special effort. It is not learned anywhere. It is not a knowledge accumulated, and it is not a result of any training. So like the thermometer, we also can never experience a past or future. For example, all of us must have had breakfast in the morning. Can you experience the eating of the breakfast, the food in your mouth, the taste of it, the temperature of it, the feel of it, the touch of it? Can you experience them now? Absolutely no. You may have a memory of it. You may experience a thought of what that food was like. But then that thought is the one which you are experiencing, not the food, not the content of your breakfast. So thought is what is being experienced, and that experiencing or knowing is in the now. It's not in the past. As Peter Zubin used to say very often, this now, the knowing of things in the now, you can never get rid of it. You can't just stop and push away this now. Try and you see if you can step into any past or future, pushing away the now. You cannot do it. Even if you think of a past or future, that will be a thought being experienced in the now only. So, in effect, you are always in the now. Your knowing is in the now. Similarly, where does this experiencing or knowing happen? Just like we answered the question of when does the experience happen? It happens only in the now. Where does it happen? It happens only in the here, whatever that here is. It doesn't happen somewhere there, beyond the space or beyond where you are. Wherever you are, that is here, and that experiencing or knowing happens in the here. So we have, as a matter of fact, 2 or 3 questions about this experiencing. We already examined 2 questions. When is the experiencing? It is in the now. Where is the experiencing? It is here always. And who is this experiencer? To whom is this experience happening? So the 3rd question is who? We normally think that who is somewhere inside this body mind, and I am the experiencer sitting inside this body mind. So with these limitations of mind, I think I am viewing or sensing or knowing. These are all alternate terms I'm using, which are almost synonyms. Experiencing, sensing, knowing, whatever word you may like to use. In the now and in the here is by me, who is a limited object, which is a part of this whole world that is perceived. Just as I perceive the world which is external to me, I perceive this body, and I also can feel a mind. So body, mind, we can consider them together. So I perceive the body, mind, just as I perceive the world. But I think this body, mind is mine, and something which is outside this skin is the world. So we put an arbitrary limit on ourselves, and we call something as me and mine, and whichever is not me as the world. So we think we have this sensing capacity, knowing capacity within this limited mind and body. And there is a much bigger world which is sensed, which is perceived out there. So we bring in the difference of a me and a not me. So we divide whatever is known to us into two components. One, a me here, and a not me outside, external to me. This knowingness by itself has no limits at all. As we saw at the very beginning, doesn't matter how filthy may be the environment or how noble it may be, your quality of knowing remains the same. Like a thermometer, the thermometer comfortably senses 6 degrees centigrade temperature as well as 60 degrees temperature. So the thermometer itself doesn't bother. Similarly, our knowing capacity doesn't bother. But we restrict by a false imagination that knowing capacity is restricted within me, in this body and mind, and there is a huge not me, the world out there. So we are in effect superimposing our felt limitation onto that knowing capacity rather than observing that knowing capacity itself to be not restricted by any sort of limitations. So if I am not able to know something in its entirety, it is because I am viewing things through a limited aperture. You can imagine a sheet of paper, for example, with a 1-inch hole made in it. If the sheet of paper obstructs your view, only providing this 1-inch diameter hole, the aperture, to provide a vision to you, then you see very limited field of sight. The scene which will be appearing to you will be restricted to that limited aperture only. So like that, we artificially impose a little aperture on ourselves. Those apertures are the 5 senses and also the mind. We may think that mind has an unlimited capacity But that's not true at all. Mind is also a finite thing. So the apparatus we have to sense these things around, the mind and the senses, they are the finite things. And the finiteness of them is transferred by us mistakenly to our knowing capacity. And our knowing capacity is infinite. And that's what we really are. The body-mind, even though we perceive and claim to be what we are, in fact, are not what we are. They are also as much perceived as we perceive the things that are around. So in that knowingness, which is all that is present, we have brought in the duality of a finite knower and a world that is known. And the world, when I'm talking about, involves not only the sights you see through your eyes, the sounds you hear through your ears, and all the other things, three sensory organs, the things that you touch, the things that you taste, the things that you smell. So whatever is detected by all the five senses, not only those, but also those things which you feel inside your body, like your various emotions, feelings. These are all perceived by us. They're all felt by us, seen by us. So all these are all world only for me in this context. I'm using that word. The other word you can use is objects. So what an object is defined as anything that is perceived, perception being any of the five senses, or even mentally imagined. So thoughts, which are also a mental activity, they're also seen by us within the mind, or so-called within the mind. So they are also a sort of objects. And all objects, by definition, are finite. They are not infinite. They either are restricted by a time dimension, or a space dimension, or some other parameter which is measured. So they have a beginning or an end, either in time or in space. So mind is also such a finite object. That is why you are able to sense it, and you are able to say, I have a mind. So this knowing capacity which you have detects not only the world, not only your body, not only your senses, it detects the mind also. So including the mind, everything is world there. So what ultimately is there? A knowing capacity and the world. We are dividing into these two things. That's also because we are using a finite aperture called mind now to communicate, to understand, to think, to analyze, and do all sorts of things like this. That is this knowingness which we have, all of us within us, first emerges within itself like a little aperture, like a little offshoot. So that offshoot is the mind. With the mind comes along the dimension of time or thinking. In fact, time and thinking are about the same. There is no difference between them. Because a thought is the one that goes in one dimension along the time dimension with a start and an end. It happens in time. So with thought comes time, and the thought comes out of this knowingness only as a little perturbation, as a little offshoot. When the mind goes a little beyond just time dimension, and that means beyond just the thought, and begins to perceive things, it adds the space dimension. The perception comes through the senses. The thinking, imagining happens only with the mind, and the perception gets added on to it as an additional parameter when the senses come into the picture, and the senses will bring in space with it. So within this knowingness, for which we can use other words like consciousness, awareness, Brahman, these are all just pointers to it. In fact, we can never put our finger on that knowingness and show here is knowingness. So this qualitative aspect with which we are now talking about which we are now talking about is that knowingness unlimited. So the knowingness develops a little offshoot of itself, which becomes a little perturbation, which is the thought. Then with thought comes along the senses adding on, we get to space. So time and space are thus created within this knowingness itself. So we have first the knowingness shooting off a little perturbation within itself, because there is nothing else other than knowingness. This perturbation bringing in the time dimension, and the perception bringing in the space dimension. Or putting it in other words, this consciousness, Brahman, awareness, knowingness, whatever name you call, viewed through this thought becomes time. This consciousness viewed through perceptions, through senses, becomes space. That is how this time-space emerge within knowingness. But many people do not go into this depth of analysis, and what they do is that finite knowingness of theirs with which they see the world, they sense their body, they are aware of their own thinking and imagining. They take themselves to be real, and they attribute a reality to all the objects perceived by them. So they think a finite me is somewhere residing inside this body mind, and there is a world which is outside me, and I am born into this world. And I see in my experience as this little finite being that no action is done unless there is a doer of action. Just as much as I consider myself as a knower, for all actions, we think there is a doer. To call some things as mine, there is an owner. So I know things, so I am the knower. I do things, therefore I am the doer. I possess things, therefore I am the owner. So these three qualities of owning, knowing, and doing are taken to be real, And we then get a doubt. Who is it that has created this whole world into which I am born? And this world looks to be so huge in its capacities, in its powers, in its ability, in its longevity, so much more than what I am. I am so little, so tiny, so puny compared to the forces in nature, to the time in nature, to the vastness in nature. So who could create such a huge world? We keep wondering. And because we know there has to be a doer for every action, we think there has to be somebody, a superhuman personality, a superhuman power, which has designed and created this world. So we call that finite entity within me as a jiva, an individual, and we call the world that we see as the jagat, or the literal meaning of jagat is that which keeps on moving, keeps on going. Because we see in the world nothing is constant, nothing is stable, everything is always changing. So whatever keeps on continuously changing is called jagat. So jagat is something which is not stable. So I, as the jiva, individual, I see a jagat, a world, and there has to be a superhuman creator. So the big, huge Lord sitting somewhere up in the heavens comes along. We call him as Ishvara. So we get this trinity of jiva, jagat, and Ishvara, or the individual, the world, and the creator Lord. Inquiries stop at the individual, the world, and the great Lord Creator. And they feel comfortable with that. And almost all the religions of the world, and many philosophies, except to some extent the Buddhist, stop there. And they take the world as well as the individual to be real. Whereas a rigorous inquiry doesn't stop here. It pursues still, is this Lord Creator, is my imagination, or is really such a thing there? So they want to investigate. Could there be other possibilities of my perception itself creating a world? That means, again, this perception I'm using here in a broader sense, not only the perceived world, I'm talking in terms of the sensations within the body, including feelings, emotions, and so on, and the intangible, thinking and imagining. So we have thinking and imagining, and the sensations felt in the body, and the world perceived outside. When I lump them all together and called as perception, whether this perception itself is creating everything that we see around. So the first thing where we stop at with the individual, the world, and the Lord Creator is called as Srishti Drishti Vada. That is the doctrine of creation-based perception. I perceive because there is a pre-existing creation already there. That is called as the doctrine of creation-based perception. The continuation of the inquiry now by us leads to what is called as Drishti Srishti Vada. That is a perception-based creation. So the creation is happening because I am perceiving it. Because who is this I who is doing the perceiving, the knower? That is the infinite knowing capacity, that quality itself, which is which doesn't have any limitations. That is sort of knowingness which we open with. So everything is knowingness. See, this knowingness perceives, because that is the only one which can have that sentience. So with this sentience, when it perceives, the world gets created. So this, as I said, is called as drishti srishti vada. That means perception-based creation. Then further on, the question can come up. Is it still my imagination? Can anything happen at all? And the final answer that comes to there is, I'm quickly winding up, that there is no creation at all. This is the doctrine of nothing is ever born, or ajativada. Doctrine of perception-based creation can be of three types. The perception can give rise to creation. Then the perception and creation may come up together. They may evolve together, or the perception itself is a creation. That means they are synonyms. Perception is creation. The perception giving rise to creation is the theory supported by quantum physics. We'll open it up for questions and answers.